Welcome to the Wild Crone Wisdom podcast with your host Vinutha Mohan. In this episode, we explore the timeless fable of the Emperor's New Clothes and its striking parallels to modern society, uncovering how power, deception, and the fear of exclusion shape our world, and why speaking the truth is more important than ever. Have you ever found yourself agreeing with something you knew wasn't true just because everyone else did? This isn't just peer pressure at work, it's a fundamental part of human nature. And few stories illustrate this better than the timeless fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes. You may remember the tale about a vain emperor who was swindled by a pair of con artists. If you recollect, the swindlers were spinning him new clothes that would only be visible to those that were loyal and intelligent. It would be invisible to those that were unfit for office and or unusually stupid. Needless to say, no one wanted to be exposed as an impostor or as disloyal to the crown, and everyone pretended to see the beautiful fine silk clothing that was being spun day after day. The emperor sent many trusted officials, and even though they could see nothing, they each came back singing great praises about this unusual gown because no one wanted to appear stupid or unfit. The emperor himself could not see anything being spun and was aghast, questioning his own fitness for office. Finally, the big day dawned, and the swindlers collected enormous sums of money and left the city at dawn. During the procession, everyone watched the buck-naked emperor parading about the streets, and no one dared say a thing. Everyone hemmed and hawed and sang praises of the emperor's new clothes, until an innocent child just blurted out, "But he has no clothes! He's naked!" The father tried to silence the kid, but he kept repeating and insisting that he could see no clothes. Slowly, all the other citizens murmured in assent. Still, the king and his retinue continued to pretend that he was fully dressed and held their heads high until they reached the palace. This fable is more than just a children's story. It's a profound reflection of society, one that historian and philosopher Yuval Noah Harari explores in his work on truth and power. Yuval Noah Harari, one of the greatest philosophers of the 21st century and the author of Sapiens, among other books, makes a very interesting observation about truth and power. He makes a fascinating discovery. Truth and power can travel together only so far. If you want power, at some point, you will have to spread or support fiction. If you want truth, at some point, you have to renounce power. Think about that for a second. The emperor, surrounded by advisors who told him only what he wanted to hear, had lost touch with reality. In the end, it took an innocent child who had no idea about power to just blurt out the truth. This isn't just a fairy tale phenomenon. It happens every day in corporate boardrooms and political offices. As you get higher up the corporate hierarchy, you have less and less access to the truth. People begin to tell you just what you want to hear, adjust their PowerPoint presentations to feed your worldview, and avoid delivering you the bad news that you have no appetite to hear. Why is that? According to Yuval, apparently humans as a species prefer power to truth. The result? Leaders trapped in their own illusions, much like the emperor, even after the child had spoken the truth. How sad is the human condition? Harari also argues that self reinforcing myths have bound human societies together since the Stone Age. A leader's most devoted followers are often those who willingly believe the most outrageous lies. The best way to prove your loyalty to a group isn't by questioning its beliefs, but by believing the unbelievable. That's exactly what happens in the emperor's new clothes. The emperor's council worked hard to keep up the myth of the fake clothes for the fear of being branded disloyal all the way until the end. Studies show that people fear social exclusion more than they fear being wrong. All advertising and target marketing relies heavily on fiction and fake news. The problem here is that if all your neighbors believe the same outrageous lie, whatever it is, you can count on them to stand together in a crisis, says Yuval. This means that when you see the truth, many times you're standing alone in the wilderness. That can be very intimidating. This is why the subjects in the fairy tale were afraid to speak the truth for fear of being excluded from the tribe. It took a fearless, innocent child to break those barriers. Yuval rightfully claims that humans have the ability to both know the truth and be in denial of it. If we focus and use our discriminating intellect, each of us can discern the truth from the lies. However, our hidden agendas, whatever they might be, but mostly fear of disconnection and exclusion from our tribe, prevents us from using discernment in certain situations. In today's society, there is so much need to fit in versus belonging. Even the strongest advocates of truth struggle with this. Brené Brown, who has spent decades researching vulnerability and courage, once admitted that her own leadership team hesitated to tell her that she was overcommitting herself. When one brave colleague finally spoke up, she was promoted. No matter how much you model and talk about vulnerability, until the cows jump over the moon, humans are afraid to speak truth to power. Why are we then surprised about the ineffectiveness of so many of our leaders? Yuval concludes that there are ways to practice healthy discernment. First, invest in reliable information. We must be willing to pay good money for reliable information. If an issue is important to us, we must read good scientific literature on it. The scientific community must make more of a concerted effort to make their voices heard. Second, encourage open dialogue. Leaders must work hard to create a safe environment for their staff to speak their truth and express diverse opinions. Third, be the child in the fairy tale. When you see the emperor wearing no clothes, don't stay silent. Harari warns, silence is not neutrality. It is supporting the status quo. It is pretending and maintaining that the buck-naked emperor is parading in his finest silk. And sometimes such enabling of blatant lies can be fatal. In a world where truth is often sacrificed for power, it's more important than ever to question authority, challenge falsehoods, and find the courage to speak up. Because if we don't, we may just march blindly into destruction, heads held high, just like the emperor and his loyal followers. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Wild Crone Wisdom with your host Vinutha Mohan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist from the Bay Area, California, specializing in trauma and attachment repair. I'm also a certified EMDR specialist and a certified shamanic practitioner. In this podcast series, we delve into the journey of our spiritual essence having a human experience.
While many social scientists study human emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, and others explore transcendental experiences, few bridge the gap to help embody the spiritual wisdom in everyday life. I call this the psycho spiritual path. Through this podcast, I hope to share bite sized practical insights for navigating life as an empowered sovereign being. If you found this episode valuable, we'd greatly appreciate your support. Please consider rating, reviewing, commenting, and subscribing on your podcast platform to help us reach a wider audience. You can explore more of my writings on Medium by following the link in the show notes. We'd also love to hear about your experience, so feel free to share your thoughts with us at Wild Crone Wisdom Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for being part of our journey. Please be advised the information provided in the Wild Crone Wisdom podcast is intended for general information purposes only. Vinutha Mohan is a licensed therapist and healer. However, the content shared in this podcast does not replace or constitute professional advice, therapy, or counseling. It is essential to consult with a qualified mental health professional for personalized guidance regarding your unique circumstances. Thank you.